We all have that, right? That need to connect with people, to really get them and be gotten by them.
Yeah.
I mean, whether you're trying to get someone to see things your way or just, make someone's day a little brighter. And if you're listening to this, you probably are the kind of person who likes to get to the point, to get the good stuff, without having to wade through tons and tons of information.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of us these days.
So let's do a deep dive then. Let's go deep on some ageless principles for dealing with people.
And what makes these principles even better is that they're not just, someone's opinion or a guess. They come from real research and real experience. The book we're going to look at is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that one.
It started out as a small project, but this book has connected with millions all over the world. It's been translated into almost every language you can think of, which tells you something, right?
Definitely. It's got to be saying something important if it's reached that many people.
Exactly.
So how did this book even come about?
Well, it's a pretty interesting story.
Right.
It all started with a 2-year study.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a $25,000 study done by the University of Chicago and the YMCA schools in Connecticut. They wanted to find out what adults were really interested in.
Makes sense.
And after health, the biggest thing people wanted to know about was other people. How to understand them, how to be liked, and how to get them to think a certain way.
I can definitely see why that would be a big deal.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is that back then, there wasn't really any good practical information out there on this topic. No textbooks or anything.
Really, nothing on how to deal with people.
Nope. Pretty surprising, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big part of everyone's life. So what happened next?
Well, that's when Carnegie comes in. He starts interviewing all kinds of super successful people. Yeah, like Marconi, Edison, the inventors. And then political guys like Franklin D. Roosevelt and James Farley. Big names in business like Owen D. Young. Even celebrities, Clark Gable, Mary Pickford. And explorers like Martin Johnson. He wanted to find out what they did to connect with people and get things done.
That's a pretty diverse group of people.
It was. And he wasn't just having casual chats, He was really listening and figuring out what made them tick. First, he put it all together in a short talk. Then it became an hour-and-a-half lecture. For 15 years, he kept refining his ideas based on what he learned from thousands of adults taking his courses in New York.
So it was really a work in progress, constantly being tested and improved.
Exactly. It wasn't just him sitting in a room thinking it up.
Right.
And the book is not just theory. It's full of principles that have actually changed people's lives for the better. There's one story about a businessman who had 314 employees. Just by using these techniques, he was able to make his company way more profitable, get more free time for himself, and get more happiness in his work life and home life.
So it really worked for him.
Absolutely. And that's what we want for you with this deep dive. We're not just going to throw out a bunch of ideas. We want to give you those aha moments, those nuggets you can use right away to be better with people and get things done.
I like that. Straight to the good stuff. Okay, so where do we start?
Let's start with one of the most basic, but also one of the most important things, not judging people. It's principle number 1. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. It sounds easy, but it's harder than you think.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, we all judge sometimes, right?
All the time. But think about this. Two Gun Crowley, remember him? That cop killer.
Yeah, vaguely.
Even as he was about to be executed, he didn't think he'd done anything wrong. He said, "This is what I get for defending myself."
Wow.
Yeah. And Al Capone, the gangster, he thought he was just giving people some fun and that he was being picked on. It's amazing how even people who do really bad things can make themselves believe they're the good guys.
That is kind of mind-blowing.
It is. And it's not just them. We all do it on some level. Every time we judge someone, we're basically making it harder to deal with them.
That makes sense.
Now, John Wanamaker, the department store guy, he said that years ago, he learned that scolding people is just plain dumb.
Interesting.
He realized that he had enough of his own problems to deal with without focusing on other people's faults. And even Abraham Lincoln, Honest Abe, he was a master at handling people. But when he was younger, he used to write mean letters and poems making fun of people.
Really?
Yeah, and he even left them anonymously in public.
That's kind of harsh.
Yeah, and one of these letters really hurt someone, and that person stayed mad at Lincoln for the rest of their life. Lincoln really regretted doing that. It shows how much our words can hurt, even years later.
Wow. So you're saying we should really think before we speak?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
There's this story called Father Forgets that really shows how bad it is to always find fault with people.
Okay, what's that about?
It's about a dad who scolds his son. Later that night, the dad sees his son sleeping and starts feeling really bad. He realizes that the things he was yelling at his son for were no big deal and that he wasn't appreciating the good in him. It just shows you how much damage we can do with criticism, even to the people we love.
Yeah, I feel that. Sometimes I catch myself doing the same thing.
It happens to the best of us. But the big takeaway here is this. When you criticize people, they get defensive. Just like Crowley and Capone, they try to justify themselves. And it makes them resent you, like what happened with Lincoln. And worst of all, it usually doesn't make them change their behavior. In fact, it might even make them worse.
So basically, criticizing is a lose-lose situation.
Pretty much. So let's move on to a much better way of dealing with people. It's principle number 2. Give honest and sincere appreciation. Carnegie said, this is the biggest secret to getting people to do what you want.
Interesting. How does that work?
It's all about understanding people's deepest desires. Think about Freud. He talked about the sex drive and the drive to be great. And John Dewey talked about the desire to be important. Everyone wants to feel valued and appreciated.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. So how do you actually give this appreciation?
Well, Carnegie gives some great examples, like this one guy who would send out notes saying thanks for the money, but he wouldn't actually send any money.
Wait, what? Why would he do that?
Because he knew people would still feel good just from the expectation of getting something. It shows you how powerful that desire for appreciation is.
That's pretty wild.
And then there's Stan Novak, who had to figure out how to get his son Tim excited about kindergarten. Tim was nervous, you know?
Yeah, starting kindergarten can be scary.
Definitely. But instead of forcing him, Stan and his wife talked about all the fun things Tim would do in kindergarten, like finger painting and singing songs and making new friends. They made it sound so exciting that Tim couldn't wait to go.
So they focus on what he would gain.
Exactly. And then there's this story about how Carnegie got a huge discount on a hotel ballroom rental. Instead of just asking for a lower price, he talked about how it would actually be good for the hotel manager to give him the discount. He said that the manager could then rent out the ballroom for more expensive events that wouldn't conflict with his group. The manager loved the idea, and Carnegie got his discount.
That's smart. He made it about what the manager wanted.
Exactly. And here's a quote from Henry Ford that really sums it up. If there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well as from your own. It sounds so simple, right? But so many people forget to do it.
Yeah, we get caught up in our own heads.
All the time.
So how do we avoid that?
By remembering that it's not about us, it's about them.
Okay. Can you give an example of what not to do?
Sure. There are these bad advertising letters in the book. They're all about what the company wants. They say things like, we desire, we want, we insist. They don't even consider what the reader wants or needs.
So they're totally self-centered.
Exactly, and no one wants to read that.
Makes sense.
Now here's what to do. Barbara Anderson was looking for a job at a bank in Phoenix. Instead of talking about needing to move, she focused on how her 10 years of experience could help the banks.
Oh, smart.
Yeah, she made it about what they would appreciate, and guess what? She got multiple job offers.
So it really paid off.
Big time. There's also this great quote from Owen D. Young. He said, people who can put themselves in the place of other people, who can understand the workings of their minds, need never worry about what the future has in store for them.
So he's saying that empathy is key.
Exactly. And if you think about it, that applies to everything in life, from your career to your personal relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But before we go any further, we should probably clear something up. Some people might hear this and think it's all about manipulating people, being fake, you know.
Right. And that's not what we're saying at all. It's not about tricks or being insincere. It's about genuinely wanting to help people and finding ways to benefit both of you.
Yeah, like a win-win situation.
Exactly. And that leads us to principle number 3. Arouse in the other person an eager want. It's about understanding what people want and helping them get it while also getting what you want.
Okay, I like that.
So there's this story about a father who couldn't get his son to eat. He was really skinny. The dad tried everything, nagging, pleading, nothing worked.
Poor kid.
Yeah, he was probably sick of hearing it. But then the dad realized that what his son really wanted was to be big and strong, just like him.
Makes sense. I mean, who doesn't want to be like their dad?
Exactly. So the dad started focusing on that. He said things like, if you eat all your vegetables, you'll grow up to be big and strong like me. And guess what? The kids started eating.
So it worked.
Yep. He appealed to what his son really wanted.
Clever.
Another story. This guy named K.T. Dutchman had a daughter who wouldn't eat her breakfast cereal.
Oh, man, I know that struggle.
Right. But instead of forcing her, he let her help him make the cereal. She got to imitate her mom and feel all grown up, and guess what? She ate it all up.
So it's about making it fun and giving them a sense of control.
Exactly.
I like that. It reminds me of something Carnegie said about how so many people try to make others interested in them.
Right. But the truth is, people are mostly interested in themselves. And there was this study by the New York Telephone Company. They counted how many times people said the word I in conversations, and it was a lot.
Not surprising.
Right. Even Napoleon, one of the most powerful men in history, he had very few close friends.
Even with all that power.
Yep. He was so focused on himself that people didn't really trust him. There's a quote by Alfred Adler, a psychologist, that I think really sums it up. He said, "It is the individual who is not interested in his fellow men who has the greatest difficulties in life and provides the greatest injury to others. It is from among such individuals that all human failures spring."
Powerful words.
They are. And they remind us that being interested in other people is essential for success and happiness.
Absolutely.
Now, there's a heartwarming story about Theodore Roosevelt. He was known for being very charming and likable. One day, he was walking outside, and his valet's wife was looking out the window.
Okay.
She was really interested in this bobwhite bird that was singing.
A bobwhite bird, huh?
Yeah. And even though his staff couldn't see him, Roosevelt called out a friendly greeting to her.
Huh. That's sweet.
Yeah, it was just a small gesture, but it showed how much he cared about people.
Right. It's those little things that make a difference.
Totally. And Carnegie himself used this principle to get famous authors to speak at his writing course. He would write to them, expressing his admiration for their work and asking for their advice.
I bet they were flattered.
Of course, they loved it, and they were happy to help him out.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Mrs. Rosedale. She always banked at the same place because one of the employees had been so kind to her mother. Even though there were closer banks, she stayed loyal because of that personal connection.
That's loyalty.
Exactly. And then there's the story of C.M. Naffel Jr., who was trying to sell fuel. At first, he kept criticizing chain stores, thinking it would make people want to buy from him instead. But it didn't work.
What did he do?
He changed his approach completely. He went to a chain store executive and asked for his advice. He pretended he needed help defending chain stores in a debate. The executive loved it, he felt like an expert, and he ended up placing a huge fuel order with Naffel.
Wow, what a turnaround.
It shows you the power of making people feel important and knowledgeable. There's this old Roman poet named Publius Syrus, and he said something really smart. We are interested in others when they are interested in us.
It makes sense. We tend to gravitate towards people who make us feel seen and heard.
Exactly. And lastly, there's this really touching story about a student nurse. It was Thanksgiving, and she was working at a hospital. There was this one patient who was all alone, feeling really down.
Oh, how sad.
Yeah, it was rough. But this nurse went out of her way to talk to him, to really listen to him, and it made a huge difference to that patient.
It's amazing how a little bit of kindness can go such a long way.
Absolutely. So the main takeaway here is this. Be genuinely interested in other people.
That's it. Seems too simple.
It is simple, but it's not easy. But it's the most important thing you can do to improve your relationships and your influence.
Got it.
So to recap, the 3 principles we talked about today are: don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Give honest and sincere appreciation, and arouse in the other person an eager want.
All right, so 3 things to remember. No criticizing, show appreciation, and focus on what the other person wants.
That's it.
Okay, so now that we've gone over these principles, what should our listeners do next?
Think about your next conversation with someone. What if you tried using just one of these principles? How do you think it would change the interaction?
Yeah. That's a good question to ask ourselves.
And remember, these aren't just theories. These principles have been proven to work for decades. They can help you build stronger relationships and get more of what you want.
Okay, I'm convinced. I'm going to try it. What else should our listeners do?
Think back on your own life. Where have you seen these principles at work or not at work? And where can you start using them today? The more you practice, the better you'll get.
Great advice. Any last words of wisdom?
Here's a final thought. Take a look at your own beliefs about how to connect with people and influence them. Do any of them need to change based on what we talked about today? That's something worth thinking about even after this deep dive is over.
That is some food for thought. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. This has been a really insightful deep dive, and I hope everyone listening will take these principles and make them their own.
Me too. It's all about connecting and growing, right?
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.